Welcome to Beams, Screams, and Dreams, the only show where the viewer gets to tell their truth. I'm your host, Joshua Wiggin, and we're very happy to have you here tonight for our inaugural episode. We have some incredible guests and topics for you tonight. Our intent with this show is to provide a safe place for those willing to share their experiences, thoughts, and theories. Stories like the ones you will hear on this show, under different circumstances, are often met with criticism, skepticism, and ridicule. What those on the outside of these experiences fail to realize is that the tapestry of this universe is woven with threads that are sometimes invisible to the naked eye. With that being said, tonight we have Katy, the psychic artist, and Starseed, being hunted by an unseen cryptid and Nazi time travel experiments, as well as our news segment, Extranormal News. Without further ado, we'll bring you our first guest. All right. Hi, Katy. Welcome to Beams, Screams, and Dreams. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to have you here. Glad you're able to reach out and get in contact with us.
Of course.
So when you wrote me, you said you started having some experiences with the otherworldly when you were a child. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Right. So I was born in 93, so this had to have been, I don't know, I can't count, like 97, I don't know, early 90s, late 90s, whatever. And, as children, I'm like 4 years old, you sleep with your parents, at night. And every single night that I was in there, I would have these experiences where I would like wake up out of nowhere, like nothing really, woke me up. I didn't hear anything. It would just kind of be spontaneous. And there would be these small shadow beings, for lack of a better term, in the room with me. So it was always three of them. And you could tell, even though you couldn't see, features or anything, you could tell that they were small, and their heads were pretty big for how small they were. So my parents had a water bed that was like pretty low to the ground, and they didn't come up very much over it. And whenever this would happen, I would, like I said, 4 years old, so I'm freaking out, but I'm like frozen. So I would eventually, they would kind of do this thing where two of them would run around the room. Like my parents are, on either side of me, I'm in the middle, and they would switch between my parents. But the third one that was standing at the end of the bed, it would just always be there. So like I said, I'm scared. I'm like frozen. So I would eventually throw my head underneath the covers, right. And somehow manage to pass out. And that was one of the things that was always super weird to me about it. Like when you're that scared, how do you like fall asleep?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Definitely. With your general sense of that experience, was there a benevolence, a malevolence, or anything like that you could sense with the presences?
Thinking back to it now, all these years later, they didn't give off anything really energetically. Like I didn't pick up on much from them other than they shouldn't have been there, pretty much. But not necessarily. I mean, being a kid, being scared of it, I was like, it's gonna hurt me. It's a ghost. It's a whatever it is. But looking back at it, they didn't really give off anything. It was neutral, pretty much. But I would pass back out, and I'd wake up in the morning, and it would just kind of be like nothing really happened. And I would tell my parents about it, and I didn't know what to call them. So because they were small, I just called them munchkins because I didn't know how to, I had like no framework for that.
Right.
And of course, my parents are just like, you're 4 years old, like you're fine, like it's just, you're crazy or you're dreaming or you're whatever. So I never really, nobody ever really paid attention to it really. And it wasn't until I started to develop an intense fear of aliens in any kind of capacity. But what really scared me was E.T. the Extraterrestrial, that movie. It was really big at the time.
Right.
And my mom, she'd have me watch it, and I would be, absolutely terrified. Like it was almost like having PTSD, I guess, because I was like, I guess I was having these experiences with these things, and my, child mind didn't know any framework for it other than it's kind of like that, and I don't want to see that. You know what I mean? And she would always tell me, oh, well, he's a good alien. And I was like, I don't care. I'm scared, you know what I mean? And it got to the point where, I was having like night terrors and dreams about killing him, like literally chopping his head off, because I guess I was so traumatized by whatever was coming in the room at night, pretty much.
Now, was there a time where these sightings and that sort of experience just fell off for you? Was it short-lived just for that brief period of time around when you were 4 years old, or is it something that had continued on past that?
Oh yeah, like for my whole life. So, after having those experiences, as I started to grow up, I was just kind of naturally drawn to the paranormal. So I would be, the kid in elementary school, like in the library, checking out all of the books on UFOs, ghosts, all of that kind of stuff. And I really had this obsession with it, you know what I'm saying? And it was kind of, to a degree, at times unhealthy, how much I was obsessed with it. And so it didn't really make sense until, later on, as I got older and I was researching things and stuff like that, I was able to put together kind of why, you know what I'm saying? And I did continue to have experiences, although they shifted, they kind of changed. They weren't, the same kind of like shadow being sort of things going on. But according to my mother, this was something that I was talking about since like being in the crib. So I don't know if you've ever heard the stories about like the shadow man with the hat and that whole gig.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she told me, that I was in the crib at like 2 years old telling her, oh, mommy, there's a shadow man in here. And I kind of have vague memories of that as well. But there's, like I said, there's a whole lot, a whole lot.
Yeah, I know with the Shadow Man and the Hat Man always
Right.
come with a sense of dread,
Right.
and like a sleep paralysis, that inability to move.
Right. And I've had a lot of experiences with that as well.
Man, do experiences like this still continue for you to this day?
Not currently, and I really attribute that to the fact that because, for a large portion of this, I wasn't very aware to kind of the other aspects of those experiences. So, for instance, spirituality that kind of comes with that sort of thing. I was always just kind of super interested in it, but it didn't really evolve to the point of like, kind of understanding the entire nature of it and being able to kind of take control of that by basically being spiritually aware is the only way I can kind of describe it.
Now, are these experiences what led you into your current profession of being a psychic artist? And Can you tell me a little
Right.
bit about what a psychic artist is, how you got into it, and when you began to realize that you might have a psychic ability?
So I knew that for my entire life. Like I was always that person that would have like intense deja vu. I'd be the type of person where I'd have a dream about somebody and call them up and be like, yo, I had this weird ass dream, this and this happened. And then of course it would. I was always really intuitive and sensitive to energy, I guess what you could call an empath. So being able to just be intuitively aware of the energy of people around you in situations and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, my entire life, I always had like, I used to tell, my parents and people like I'm a psychic, and everybody would be like, "You're crazy," and I'd be like, "No, no, I'm psychic. I can prove it." Like just for instance, like something kind of trivial, but whenever certain people are pregnant around me, I'll know stuff like that. You know what I
Oh,
mean? I'll
wow.
have a dream like so and so is pregnant, and I call them up. Are you pregnant? Yeah. Um, and then yeah, so working with tarot cards and oracle and channeling and stuff like that, it all kind of goes into that same realm. So working with people's energy, tapping into their consciousness and their higher selves and pulling information down through the cards and such like that. But yeah, my entire life pretty much.
Wow. And with the psychic art, I've seen some of the, oh, excuse me, dropped my pen there. I've seen some of the artwork that you've made and that you post. What can you tell me about that?
So those are basically, I make Oracle, and I'm currently working on a tarot deck right now, but I've made Oracle decks. It has a lot to do with channeling. So as I'm making an artwork, I won't even necessarily um, realize the symbolism behind all of the components that I'm using until afterward. When I can, actually look at the full piece and understand, like, oh, okay, so my spirit guide was giving me this information for this piece. You know what I'm saying? It kind of works in that manner.
And with your channeling, is this more of a direct channeling? Is there some entity that you go directly to, or is this more of an accessing of the Akashic record sort of channeling?
Right. So it's kind of a mixture. I am in contact with, I have two spirit guides. And I obviously believe that everyone has spirit guides. It kind of just depends on whether you're tapping into them or not. But as I just, discovered kind of the spiritual aspect of the ET phenomena, I came into the knowledge of being connected to a sixth dimensional entity named Niel, which is an aspect of my higher self. So I don't know if you know kind of like what higher self means, or, that sort of concept, but it's pretty much, that aspect of your consciousness that is connected directly to the universe. And it's kind of hard to explain, because some people, when they talk about spirit guides, they'll talk about like my grandmother, right? Or,
Sure.
somebody who's passed over. But for me, what this is, like I said, it's an aspect of the soul that is basically living a life sort of in a parallel dimension kind of thing. So the spirit guide is me, but it's not me, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. I've definitely done some research on similar topics, and there's that part of the self that is always in a higher plane.
Right.
With time being, if you're viewing time from a nonlinear perspective,
Right.
with the past, present, and future all happening simultaneously, it would be impossible for you to not have a part of you that is tapping into a higher dimension in that
Right.
aspect.
Yeah,
So
so that's pretty much what it is.
okay, and so you also with that you make your own tarot. You do tarot readings. And
Right.
we've also you said that you are a starseed. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Okay, so Starseed is basically, well, in my belief, everyone on the planet is a starseed, but what kind of makes the differentiation is someone waking up to that information. So a starseed is someone that has experienced lifetimes in other dimensions, star systems, just pretty much anything that's not the Earth. And there's kind of misconceptions in that community that say like starseeds are new souls to the planet, like they have come directly from, let's say Orion, and they never had any Earth lives. But a lot of starseeds have been here since ancient times, and starseeds have a mission to connect people with galactic consciousness, so connecting them to the ETs, to the quote unquote star family, how I refer to it. And it's really all about raising the consciousness of humanity to a level to where they can interact, with these beings that are trying to communicate with humanity.
And with that, do you think that, in your opinion, that star seeds are innately psychic because they've had these experiences and are able to kind of tap into that sort of Akashic record and give
Oh yeah,
a little bit more insight?
yeah, for sure. Most of them, some of them will kind of fall prey to the earth realm. A lot of starseeds are incredibly sensitive, they're intuitive, they're psychic, they're empathic. And so some of them, they also, starseeds tend to have kind of a rougher road in life, I guess, usually having kind of crappy childhoods because you're sort of, you're incarnated into this life that you don't necessarily understand. So a lot of starseeds don't understand human culture. So they're usually the people that are like rebels, you know what I'm saying? The people that are against authority, against government, they don't understand the structure of the human race as it stands. And so they might, a lot of them fall into drug addiction, mental health crises. Their experiences can be viewed as schizophrenia, psychosis. A lot of them are ADHD, ADD, stuff like that. So, what was your question again? I started rambling and I completely forgot.
Well, I think we were just basically touching on the connection between being a star seed and psychic ability. And
Oh right, yeah. So yeah, if they don't fall prey to kind of silencing their abilities, because sometimes they will need to. If like I said, if things are kind of a little bit too traumatic around a star-seeded person, they might go into a mode where they completely shut all of that off. But it's easily accessed and reactivated when basically somebody does the work to connect with that. But a lot of us are just kind of naturally within that frequency. And so we just sort of naturally kind of cultivate those abilities as we move along in life.
Are star seeds? Do you think typically drawn to one another? Have you built a community of fellow star
Oh
seeds?
yeah, oh yeah, for sure. I actually didn't for a long time know what a starseed was, and a couple of years ago I was on Tumblr uh, at the time, and the starseed thing was kind of pretty big there. But the reason I was there is because I had an alien and UFO paranormal blog, and so I was searching through the tags and just inevitably came across this concept of starseeds. And at first when I saw it, I was like, these people are nuts, man. Like I really thought like this is crazy. But as I started to research it more, because like I said, I'm already on the alien UFO wavelength, I'm like, well, obviously I need to research this. I need to see what this is. And the way that they described these people and just kind of all of the, strings in my life coming together made sense for it. And so I kind of had this moment of like, oh no, I'm a psycho. Like I'm associated with this thing that I think is kind of crazy. But inevitably, kind of realizing that catapulted me to sort of new heights in my life, if you'd like to say.
So that sort of realization kind of awakened more of your like maybe latent psychic energy, or
Right,
was
right.
that a chicken and the egg sort of situation?
Right, right. I started to have a lot more like really like crazy experiences, like and really, getting to that understanding of like this stuff that I've been reading about for all of these years and wholeheartedly believing in, you know what I mean? It's like real, coming to that like actual realization, like that's legitimate.
Wow. So you've been on quite the incredible journey. Where do you see it leading you?
Honestly, I have no idea. I'm the type of person where it's kind of like, you got to leave things up to the universe sort of thing. Um, I definitely plan to continue with, the tarot and the oracle and the art and, all of that kind of stuff. But I mean, I have no idea. I've thought about writing, some books and trying to get myself out there because, like I said, Starseeds, we have this mission to kind of awaken people to this stuff. But Starseeds, like I said, they can be antisocial. They can find it hard to um, basically get their voice out there. You know what I mean? But we all have this kind of nagging feeling like we have to share, this information. And so I kind of just see myself continuing to attempt to do that.
Right, I think that's a noble path you're on there with
Right.
that. And with that being said, is there anything that you'd like to plug here, your for your art or your divination, anything like that that you'd like to plug? We could also put your links in the bio of the show if that's something
Yeah.
you're interested.
My Instagram is at starborn period mystic, and on YouTube I am Katy Sidra, Sidra. And that's pretty much all I have.
Oh, that's great, Katy, and thank you for coming here and speaking with me tonight. And hopefully we could get you on the show again in the future, and kind of follow your journey as well.
Yeah, for sure. This was really cool.
Yeah, I'm glad you got a chance to come by. Well, Katy, we'll talk to you next time. And once again, thanks for coming on Beam Screams and Dreams.
All right. Thank you.
Here next, we have a write-in from one of our listeners. What do you got for us today?
So I have a story from Sam in California, and this is what he wrote us. Some years ago, back in May of 2017, me and my brother were out jeeping and exploring the Stanislaus National Forest in Calaveras County, California, around noon. I wasn't really much of a believer till the following events happened. We were on an old fire road about 10 to 15 miles in, and it was a breezy day, but not completely windy. It was blowing east to west. We came up to a tree down in the road, but luckily we had brought the chainsaw. It was about 16 inches of half-rotted pine. We got to work, removed the felled tree from the road, and continued on to find two more. This time they were smaller, about 6 to 8 inches, and green with life still. I told myself it had to be the wind, but the odd thing was they broke more as they had been sheared about 2 feet up from the ground on both sides of the road. One tree on either, crossing like a gate and pointing north to south. I had my brother hop out and lift them enough to squeeze the Jeep under. We only made it a few more miles down the trail to a big cedar, also half rotted. This tree was broken about 8 foot up. At that point, I realized we'd run out of saw gas and forgot to bring the can. I barely managed to squeeze the Jeep up the bank around the tree and decided to stop and walk up the trail a little to see if we should press on or turn around. Right in front of me and my brother, about 50 yards up the road, we heard a cracking sound, and then bam, an old large oak fell in front of our eyes. This tree was also pointing north. I looked at my brother in disbelief, and instantly a feeling of fear hit me and my neck hair stood up. My brother felt the same unease. Both of us at that moment decided it would be best to turn around. Whatever was keeping us out, we did not want to meet. As we're walking back to the Jeep, we heard several more snapping then crashing sounds. And sure enough, all the way back out, we had to winch fallen trees out of the road. This was the only exit and the road we had just come down. The weirdest part was we saw no other people nor animals during this time, but smelled something horrible when we got out of the Jeep every time. Also, no other trees were breaking or down off of the trail, nor were they following the direction of the wind. It has taken me years to talk about this, and I still haven't gone back to this location. My brother has tried to delete this memory from his head. I've since gained a lot of respect for Mother Nature and the secrets she holds, and I always leave apples or some sort of fruit when I go jeeping as a possible peace offering. I've done scary things in my life, but never felt hunted and trapped like I had on that trip.
Wow. So yeah, it was an incredible story. I looked into this area. That's the Stanislaus National Forest in Calaveras County, and found some pretty interesting information. I mean, there are Bigfoot sightings that go back into the late 1800s, which is around the time the area was being settled, with the westward expansion and the gold rush. As well as before that, that was Miwok Native tribes land.
Yes.
Which is pretty interesting.
Yes.
Because the folklore and beliefs they had there with the Miwok tribe was that there was a people before people, and that some would believe that these people that existed before people had passed on, and that was the time before time. But other Miwoks still believe that they're around, and to me that also still sounds very similar to a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a lot of different kind of folklore for different native or indigenous peoples in America that relate a lot of information that's very similar to the spirit of the forest or the Sasquatch that people have. And I really like this account because although we don't have like the sighting of it, we have the smell, which is something that is kind of a common theme, but we also have the trail, which is being blocked like every so often. And then once again, where they've already taken down these trees, it's blocked again.
Right. It's like really just kind of like a big warning.
Sure.
Like, we don't want you here. And then it's like, okay, you want to chop down the stuff that I've already like pushed in your way to keep you out. It's like, well, now I'm going to show you what fear is.
Sure.
I'm gonna keep you in here and make you fight your way back out, which I think is pretty incredible. And also with that, with the Miwok tribe folklore, that those like people before people can sometimes manifest as almost a trickster entity. So it can almost like, come off as maybe like a forest elemental or something like that,
Right.
You're coming through in a Jeep with a chainsaw, kind of doing your own thing, doing the human thing. And, that might not be with an entity like that once,
Sure.
in its forest.
And, we reached out to some Miwok tribes people interested to see if we could get a little bit more clear idea from their perspective, from their, their natural perspective of understanding this and being that indigenous tribes people. And we're waiting to hear back, but I think that'd be a great topic to discuss, further down the line, and we can get somebody on for that. But otherwise, great story, Sam. Thank you so much for writing that in and sharing that with us and being a part of Beams, Screams, and Dreams.
Yeah, we really do appreciate it. And if there are any native listeners that would like to, write us and share some of their folklore with us, we'd love to have you on, and we'd love to hear from you. I think with that, we'll roll into our next segment is Extranormal News. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Ashley Wiggin, bringing you the weirdest and wildest news stories from around the globe. If it's extra normal, you'll find it here on Extranormal News. Today, I'm taking you to Gainesville, Florida, where the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission trapped a 100-pound Suwannee alligator turtle, along with two others weighing in at 64 and 46 pounds. The new species of Suwannee turtles were trapped in a tributary coming off the Santa Fe River, where the FWC commented there is little biological productivity. Is this cryptid-like creature the future of these animals, or a look into the past? The FWC will continue to research into the nature of the animals. And in other news, a Florida man, only identified as Splinter, seeks his lost mutant ninja turtles after what he claimed to be one hell of a meth binge. More on that never. Up next, we go to the West Coast for a story you may have heard on your local news. On August 30th, two pilots for separate airlines radioed in an unusual sighting.
We just passed a guy in a jetpack. Back in 1997,
A man in a jetpack was spotted at nearly 3,000 feet near LAX, but now others are suggesting the unidentified flying object was a balloon, drone, or something else. The identity of the man and the origin for the technology remains a mystery. Boba Fett could not be reached for further comment. And coming out of Birmingham, England, a few weeks ago, a security guard had quite the chilling tale. In the early morning of August 18th, a ghostly apparition wandered through a construction site. The woman appeared in a white dress and holding something resembling flowers. The paranormal event was all caught on the site's CCTV security footage as motion activated the snapshot. A full patrol of the construction site determined everything was all clear, leaving many questions, including, who are you going to call? Not Limitless Resources, the on-site security company. That wraps up this edition of Extranormal News. Thanks for joining us today, and tune in next time to find the most interesting and wild stories around the globe. If you've got your own Extranormal news story you'd like to share, don't hesitate to contact us.
Hi, Alex. You're live with Beam Screams and Dreams. How you doing today, man?
Doing well, Josh. How are you?
Doing great. So we're here to talk about some Nazi experiments today. What do you got for
Yes.
us?
Today we're going to be talking about the Glock, which is also known as the Bell. So to start it all off, time travel has been something that man has wondered about, written about, and attempted through the years. We have books like The Time Machine with H.G. Wells, but instead of going back in time, he went forward in time. And then more recent books like 11/22/63 by Stephen King that focused on changing the history of the assassination of Kennedy. And then in other pop culture media, you have time travel in movies like Back to the Future, Futurama, and The Terminator, along with a list of so many more. However, sometimes life imitates art, and in the case of Nazi Germany during World War II, they were trying to imitate the time travel aspect or start a whole new time travel. So during World War II, the Germans were manufacturing weapon after weapon to help support their efforts. Many of the weapons we know about, like the V2, Luger pistols, and they did attempt to make some nuclear weapons. However, there were some weapons being made there during the war that were kept secret for many, many years. Eventually, these weapons became known as the Wunderwaffe, or the Wonder Weapons. One of these weapons was the Glock, which is called the Bell. It's a large dome device, much like a bell jar, and it rotated very, very fastly on multiple axes around it, and it glowed bright, and it also gave off immense amounts of radiation. The jar or the bell device was actually made at Derize, which is known as the Giant. And for some of the listeners, these names may sound familiar if they've played games like Call of Duty Black Ops.
Sure, yeah.
And played the zombie campaign on there. So you'll see some of these names pop up in items like that. And even in that game, they had their own version of the Wonder Weapons. So the bell itself was supposedly made out of a hard metal, and it was 9 feet wide and up to 15 feet tall. So this was a massive object with a lot of material, not something that you could easily hide.
Right.
In the device, it had 2 counter rotating cylinders filled with a violet colored mercury-like substance that was supposedly powering the device. And when those materials were not in the device, they had to be stored in a lead flask due to their properties. It is said that the device, as I said earlier, emits strong radiation. Now, their description of strong, we're not really sure. Could it be large amounts of powerful gamma rays or just a large amount of radiation in general? That's still to be determined. And that's something that we can get into a little bit later on. Now, the 2 features of the device that were the most unique was it was either supposed to be an anti-gravity device, so something that you could use to float, travel, transport. But the coolest option or aspect of it was that it could also potentially be a time travel device. So we're talking 1940s Germany, wars going on, and they're focusing on making time travel devices versus trying to enhance their cause. But I guess in this case, a time travel device could do that. So with that, they had this big giant bell device that they were using for time travel. Sorry, I've had to get caught up on my notes here.
Oh, no problem, man. No problem.
Yeah. So if they had a working time travel device, who actually knows how the war could have turned out? I mean, could they have seen their chances of winning the war slowly dwindling and they went back in time and tried to undo everything? Or maybe they did try to use the device and they didn't know how it fully worked and they went either really far forward in time or really far back in time. So there's a lot of options on what could have actually happened with this device because it's still unknown a lot about it. The first mentioning of said device was actually in a book by a Polish author who went through notes of people who worked on the device. And I don't have his name in front of me, unfortunately. I should have written that down.
That's no problem.
So now with this Bell device, there are supposedly still remnants of the device at Derice, and you can go there and see them. They have their own henge like structure. Unfortunately, a lot of people will say that it's the cooling tower left over from the buildings there. Looking at the space, it doesn't look like it's going to be a cooling tower. How it's designed, I mean, you can go online, look at the pictures of it. Or, I mean, it could have been a cooling tower that was used for cooling the device while it was being operated. I mean, this thing gave off immense amount of radiation. So there's possibility of it having immense amount of heat and energy given off, and you had to find a way to dissipate that energy out of the area. There's also talk of scientists that had worked on the device that were killed due to the radiation, plus animals that were brought in. So there's a lot of information that adds up to the facts that were being presented. I mean, you have immense amount of radiation and people dying of radiation. So there's a possibility that the device was real. The bell itself has never been found, but there is speculation about its whereabouts. Some believe a Nazi-friendly country in South America may have allowed them to transport it there, which we do know that Germans went to South America after the war. They were found after there. We also know that near the end of the war, the Third Reich general who was in charge of the projects, Hans Klammer, probably butchering his name on that one, he actually disappeared along with a lot of the other scientists that were building these devices, these wonder weapons.
Right. I think that's actually it's a Kammler, Hans Kammler.
Yes.
He was a V2 rocket engineer, if I'm not mistaken, was brought over in Operation Paperclip along with Werner von Braun.
Yep. So that was going to be my next thing, is possibility of him coming over during that and being left off the papers so that we don't fully know what was brought over with him. And we know about Project Paperclip, but we don't know the full extent of it and everyone involved. We have some documentation, but not everything is available because, well, the government doesn't want you to understand that they brought over all these Nazi scientists that were supposed to be evil people, but now they're like, hey, they're working for us. It's cool.
It's NASA now.
Yeah. Which NASA's, great, but at the time it had a sordid history. I mean, it wasn't the greatest.
Right.
So, or there's possibility that all these devices could have been brought to what we now know as Area 51. I mean, it's a weapons development and testing area. It's a large space. You can't fly over. You can't get in. You never know what's in there. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the possibilities with Operation Paperclip, and these guys being brought over, there's so much stuff that we'll never know about that. And I don't see like any of that ever really being brought to light. Obviously Werner von Braun, due to the Apollo program and being able to land people on the moon, kind of got notoriety on his own, but we only know a fraction of the names even of the scientists that would have been brought over in Operation Paperclip. And with the time travel device itself, who's to say if they ever actually got it to work, or like you were saying, could send you to the distant past, to the distant future, or someplace completely unknown.
Yeah.
One of the things I've always been interested about is with a time travel device, say you don't really know where you're going to land, of course, right? How do you dial that
Yes.
in without extensive experimentation, and how do you get the results of that experimentation if the person isn't able to return? And does it only travel you through time or through space? You want to go back in time, you're on this planet, in any given location, say in this instance Nazi Germany, you roll back the clock and say I want to go 32 years into the past or 32 years in the future. How do you know you're not just going to get dropped off in space, in the same location as the device is, because the planet's in constant orbit and we're traveling quickly through outer space. It seems like a lot of variables there for kind of dialing that in.
Yeah, you have to start looking at all the paradoxes about time travel and everything that we've thought we know about it. I mean, you see everything that's talked about in the movies, like Back to the Future. He goes back, his parents don't get together, he doesn't exist, he starts fading. Or like you had mentioned, if I say I want to go back in time 10 years, if I go back in time 10 years, what happens to that future now? Is it a different universe? Is it a different alternate timeline? What options do we have? So, I mean, maybe they did go back and they changed something, but that put them on a different path into the future. So they never converge at the one that we know that we're talking about right now.
Right. And you also have to wonder about like destiny, whether even if they were able to travel back, if they were just destined to fail, no amount of things that they could change would affect the outcome of the future.
Yeah.
Or does it cause a branch reality or a branch timeline where maybe when they went back, they did change something, but it didn't affect our timeline, say, because it was, and this timeline was already, if you're not looking at time as linear, the past, present, and future are all simultaneously happening, right?
Yeah.
So you wouldn't be able to necessarily say this timeline would be changed, but possibly a branch timeline could have been created and, be vastly different than the reality we live in right now.
Yes. And of note too, with that, the Germans weren't the only people working on time travel at the time. The Americans were also working on their own time travel experiments with the Philadelphia experiment. So that's another one that you can always look into for additional info on experimentation done on time travel.
Yeah, of course. That one's pretty wild. They talk about the ship itself disappearing completely, reappearing
Yep.
hundreds of miles, I believe it was, away from where it originally started.
Yeah, it was not in the right spot. So that matches up with what we were just talking about too, where you time travel, but you end up 300 yards down the road.
Right. And I think with the Philadelphia experiment too, they had some of the sailors and stuff were kind of fused between decks and stuff, kind of merged into the ship itself as a byproduct of that traveling.
Which, I mean, it's a very good possibility.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
you're messing with something different.
right, phasing out reality and kind of creating, think about everything is a waveform, all particles, right, that create
Hmm.
matter. And if you're like changing the quantum state of that, what if the ship's quantum state changes at a different speed than a human being, and you just kind of fall through, but then it all kind of solidifies at the same time, so you're maybe fused into that.
Or they started doing quantum tunneling type things and didn't have enough energy to fully get through on it, to overcome any barriers, and they only got, well, in this case, halfway through, and they phased in with the ship.
Oh yeah, I mean the possibilities really are just kind of mind blowing with that whole sort of experimentation. Now with the bell itself, was it just one device? Do we know if they had made more than one? Because
There were two devices, and one of them listed has not been accounted for. So there's possibility that it came over or it was destroyed at some point.
huh. Yeah, and you got to think, these guys being brought over in 1945, 1946. You're leading into one of the biggest UFO flaps in the United States history, which is going to be the late 40s. Even Roswell is involved with that.
Yep. So there's possibility that one of those saucers that someone saw may have been one of these devices.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely fits the description with the bell shape, the glowing lights, kind of that classic UFO of that era.
Plus, with the immense amount of radiation, if it did land somewhere and it burns a crop circle or burns something into the grass, that would explain one of those phenomenon too, killing everything around it.
Yeah, and they did have a couple of reports, of the radiation, let's say with the Roswell crash, the Geiger counters and everything with the early walkthroughs when they were like, it's a UFO. We recovered a crashed UFO, and of course the next day a weather balloon, but people haven't gone out there for years after that, still picking up high levels of radiation.
Yeah, going with it, I mean, they tested how many nukes out there throughout the years, so possibility of that being what they're detecting, but at the same time, given everything else, possibility of the Bell or some sort of device being flown out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible, and I think giving credence to this idea is we know Operation Paperclip happened. We know some of the scientists that came over here, and we can see the clear results of that. I mean, before we translated the V2 into the Apollo program, the idea of what a space shuttle looked completely different. But then if you look at a ship like the Apollo capsules, also kind of similar in shape to one of these Bells or an early UFO as well.
That's actually a good point. I didn't even fully think about that. I mean, they have that same shape. They're going to be tall. They're going to be 10 feet wide, sometimes a little bit wider. So there's a good possibility that they took that idea from the Bell.
Right. As in, we know this vessel and this type of shape will work in space. Kind of makes you wonder how they landed on that. Seemingly out of the blue after the early drawings of spacecrafts. I mean, they all looked more like planes, kind of similar to how we actually wound up doing the space shuttle.
So, I mean, it's a lot of thoughts going into what we have because of technology that the government has made and certain industries have made, and also where they get the ideas from.
Yeah, and I mean, I find it interesting too. We're kind of going back around to almost that original design. If you look at like Elon Musk's and SpaceX's Dragon capsule, we're going back to the capsule after having scrapped the space shuttle.
It'll be interesting to see what they come up with next, or what they steal ideas from.
Yeah, I mean, you still got Robert Bigelow out there and Bigelow Aerospace kind of doing their thing. They had the whole he had bought Skinwalker Ranch for a while. They're saying, basically alien tech or we don't know, really alien tech, future tech or whatever, popping out of portals there. And, a guy who owned a bunch of hotels now owns an aerospace company.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting shift on there. And then also buying Skinwalker Ranch, which has a crazy history of everything there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's something we could get you to come back and talk about sometime.
No, I'd love to come back on, talk about anything else you want.
Hey, man, it's absolutely been my pleasure. Thank you for coming on and talking to us today. I mean, it gives me and the viewers here a lot to think about and a lot of research they can, a lot of different avenues they could go down, be it Operation Paperclip and, Skinwalker Ranch, the Bell itself, Nazi time travel, it's sky's the limit with that one. So once again, man, I just want to thank you for coming on. Hope we'll be able to get you back on the show at some time.
Sounds good. And thank you for having me.
All right, Alex. Thanks, man. Bye.
See you.
For our closing statement tonight, I'd like to leave you with a quote from author Colin Wilson in his book, Beyond the Occult, 20 Years Research into the Paranormal. Dull states of everyday consciousness tell us that the material world is all there is. States of more intense awareness reveal that this world is not all there is. There are hidden realms of reality beyond the grasp of everyday consciousness, and if spirits are part of these hidden realms, then it would obviously be a mistake to dismiss them as unimportant. Thank you for tuning in to Beam, Screams, and Dreams. Until next time.